Ninas movement is calling for a fundamental transformation of Nigeria, citing the country's long history of broken promises and contradictions. According to Tony Nnadi, Nigeria's attempts to promote patriotism through the national anthem are futile, as the country's actions consistently undermine its lofty declarations. Ninas argues that Nigeria's problems stem from its flawed foundation, particularly the imposition of the 1999 Constitution without the consent of the people. This constitution is based on three falsehoods. They say that the people of Nigeria agreed to unite, that they resolved to live in unity, and that they gave themselves the constitution. The movement emphasizes that Nigeria's issues cannot be resolved through superficial measures like changing the national anthem or holding elections under a disputed constitution. Instead, Ninas are proposing a 5-point constitutional reconstruction plan, which involves acknowledging the truth about Nigeria's false foundation and renegotiating the terms of the union. This is the Eastern Eye. I'm Alex Obodo. Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that X-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me tonight is Barrister Tony Nnadi. He's the Secretary General, Lower Niger Congress, LNC, and co-convener of the Indigenous Nationalities Alliance for Self-Determination, NINAS. Thank you so much, Barrister Tony Nnadi, for joining me tonight on the Eastern Eye.
Not even Barrister. Glad to be with you again.
All right. Okay, good, great. I understand you always don't like me to say the Barrister Tony Nnadi. Okay, I would just say Tony Nnadi, but where I come from, I can't just throw your name at you like that. I hope you understand. All right, so the NINAS has key points in their proposals, one of which is that acknowledging the false foundation, recognizing that Nigeria's constitution was imposed without the people's consent. How do you situate this for those who are probably not well aware of this issue?
Well, the matter is simple. We're looking at Nigeria. This is a state of the union kind of exchange. What are we seeing? What are we going to do about the things we don't like? You look around the country, you see the agitations in the Niger Delta, you see the Biafra commotion in the Igbo side, and the rest of the western side waving the Odua flag. You see corruption that is walking on the street. You see impunity, the type we see going on in Port Harcourt now, and the Supreme Court that is able to turn men into women, just traveling outside the Constitution. You see the massive impoverishment that has happened from the policies of the government in place and all such things. And then Nigeria begins to look like a war zone for its constituent peoples. And then we are saying that most of the constituents, the constituent components of Nigeria, those people who the British lumped together in 1914 and called them Nigeria, they are feeling trapped in this union. It's a union at gunpoint for them, and they have done everything to raise the alarm they should raise, because there is a known cause for the disease that is bedeviling Nigeria and Nigerians. That known cause is the departure from the federal arrangements that was agreed upon at the time of independence. That is to say, the federating regions will be like countries of their own, unionizing into a federating, in which they each had their constitutions and controlled their economic assets and pursued their developments according to their own priorities, using their own economic assets. And so in the eastern region of the time, you had the palm produce being the basis of the economy, and it was doing so very well. We had the cocoa-based Western region economy, and it was doing so very well. And you see, it came down to where those things collapsed in 1966, and got replaced by a unitary constitutional arrangement. the name of the disease that is about to kill Nigeria, that is choking Nigerians wherever they are, whether they are being beheaded in the Middle Belt or they are being expropriated in the Niger Delta of their oil and gas, or they are being pursued around the forests of Ife and Ekiti in Yoruba land, whatever it is, or they are being forced to leave their homeland to flee towards America and Europe, dying in the Mediterranean and trekking across the dangerous desert. There is only one thing that is at the center of why those things are happening: the unitary constitutional arrangement of Nigeria. That is 100% responsible for all of what we have seen not working with Nigeria. And so, why do people cry about those things? And the fact that they have identified what the problem is, like an ailment that has to be cured, you have to do a diagnosis. The NENA's diagnosis is that it is the unitary constitution of Nigeria that is the problem. For whatever anybody may point to as a problem, whichever way it manifests, we're in a position to point you to the section of the constitution that is directly responsible for it. And if you want us to try, even in course of this program, you can raise a few of the things, whether it's corruption or impunity or the lack of infrastructure or the electoral malfeasances we see, that you go to election and the outcome is turned into something else. All of that. Anyone you say, now tell me, how is the Constitution responsible for this? Then I will take you to the section, that is responsible for it. Why are the governors and the president stealing in this manner? Why is it that none of them is called to account or held to account? The entire thing is by that Constitution. And so, when people begin to say, we can't continue like this, you see them agitating in one form or the other. If you want to understand the agitation, if you want to understand their complaint, against the backdrop of what I've just explained, we go to the preamble to that Constitution. Those statements you said about the false claim,
Barrister Nadi,
in that preamble.
Barrister Nadi, sorry that I'm interrupting you, but of course, the president made a broadcast a few minutes ago, and a state of emergency has been declared in Rivers State, and the governor and the deputy has been suspended for 6 months. So, and you alluded to it when you started the response. So with everything happening in Rivers, it culminated to this: removal of the governor and his deputy. You've always seen this as the end game, that this was where it was headed, to remove the governor and his deputy?
Yes, you see, we know where it is coming from. It is the president. You have now seen the real man, the man behind the masquerade has now spoken up. And where we've landed now was exactly how Nigeria began this journey to damnation right after independence. The independence election produced an outcome that could have been easy to proceed happily with. Those who did not want that outcome at the center, that is the federal government of the time, didn't want that outcome. The British that were trying to hand over to their own agents didn't want that outcome. And so they truncated it. Awolowo ended up in prison from having won and a majority of the vote that would have made him the first prime minister of Nigeria. From there, the people of the Western region began to resist what was going on, because there were also regional elections in the midst of all of that. That is what did they vote for? And so that resistance became something for which the federal government of the time declared a state of emergency on the 29th of May in 1962 to contain the resistance from the people, the type that Rivers people are trying to do today. The federal government of the time, against the provisions of the constitution of the time, against all known facts around the matter, declared a state of emergency, appointed one Dr. Majekodnomi as sole administrator of the Western region of the time. It was in that suspension of the government of the Western region that the matter became worse. people trooped out, in protest. That was what became Wild Wild West when the elections made them having not resolved that matter. And so it became something for which law and order broke down on such a scale that the Western region became ungovernable. It was in that ungovernable state of Western region that the soldiers that intervened on the 15th of January had to intervene to stop the madness of the politicians that are no different from what we have seen today. You saw the origin of this commotion. The Supreme Court of Nigeria has abandoned the Constitution of Nigeria. The Supreme Court of Nigeria evaded, sidestepped, jettisoned that Constitution as it decided the presidential election of 2023. That Constitution required 25% of the votes, valid votes, cast in the Federal Capital Territory. We are tracing how they came to this, what they're doing now, that is manifesting in a state of emergency in Rivers State. The Supreme Court of Nigeria abandoned the constitution that we're already rejecting in declaring the one they now swore in later as the president from an election he clearly did not win on account of that provision of that constitution. There is nothing the Supreme Court is going to do to place itself above the constitution, as disputed as that constitution is. The Supreme Court will not be allowed to place itself above that constitution. We are tolerating that constitution for the sake of peace until we get to the discussion table. But the way they are going, they may force Nigerians to abandon that constitution and then take things into their hands. That's what the Supreme Court is inviting in this situation. And they are not alone. They are aided by the executive branch, because it is that same Supreme Court that of late affirmed the death sentence on Sunday Jackson from Adamawa, who was attacked on his farm by a Fulani invader with a knife. He saw that he would die if he didn't fight back. He fought back, managed to overpower that invader, and again, just to save himself, in self-defense, he had to stab the one who had stabbed him. And then the fellow who started the attack, the Fulani fellow in Jackson's farm, died from his own injury. Jackson ended up being charged to court and sentenced to death for defending himself in his farmland inside Nigeria because a Fulani invader had come to attack him. Now this matter travels all the way 10 years down to Supreme Court. In less than 2 minutes, the Supreme Court of Nigeria affirmed that death sentence as if that life did not matter at all. We then say, what kind of law? We saw what happened in Port Harcourt to bring us to this. These 27 men left the party. The videos are all over the place. They swore to affidavit. It wasn't something that happened in the dark, so that we begin to ask whether it really happened or it didn't. They left the party. The provision of the Constitution on the subject is that if you left the party at a time it was not in division, you lost your seat. And so whoever, whatever be the number that is left, will be the full, House of Assembly that will do the business until the vacancies are filled. The speaker that was left declared the vacancy. INEC it was that had to conduct, that filling exercise. INEC has not done so. So the governor carried on as permitted by the rules. We look at Plateau State, a similar thing happened. The Supreme Court, declared the law to say that whoever is left is the full, is the house that has to deal with the business of the legislative branch. And you see, that double standard was applied, in Rivers State. Another standard was applied in Rivers State, in which this same Supreme Court turns round to find a way to now say that those 27 men, constitute the House of Assembly. And in no time, they began to serve impeachment notice and all of that. Of course, the people came to the streets saying no. And now we have seen the intervention from Abuja again. All right. Remember in 1983.
Yes.
Hold on. Remember again, in 1983, elections happened in Ondo, the federal government didn't like the outcome, and they turned around to topple it. How did we end up? The Second Republic collapsed. After the collapse of the First Republic, from elections, again, in 1966, we are on the third cycle of this very same, mischief that will capable of plunging Nigeria into a totally uncontrollable situation. A totally uncontrollable situation. We have to tell the younger ones who didn't know that these things had happened before.
Yes.
And we are talking to that president, Bola Tinubu. We are talking to that Supreme Court. We are talking to all I do not want to talk about the minister because the buck stops on the table of his principal. They are plunging the country into the inferno we have been through. We have not even recovered from the one of 66.
Oh, yes.
Because this constitution we have now was the end product of that commotion that began on the 15th of January in 1966 when the soldiers came.
Yes, thank you.
The politicians from this same type of madness that we have seen.
Yes, thank you, Barrister Nad. I just wanted to know what's the constitutional pathway in declaring a state of emergency? Would you say that what has happened in Rivers State so far warrants that a state of emergency should be declared at this time? Has anything gone out? Has anything gone out of hand in Rivers that you need to declare a state of emergency at this point?
Just to tell you that they are working from the answers. They knew from the time the president mediated when he invited everyone to come to Abuja, and he began to tell them to first they signed an agreement that negated the facts and the reality. Then when that agreement didn't lead anywhere, they came back again recently with the leaders of the region coming along, and what the president told the governor in Rivers is to go and obey the order of the Supreme Court. What is that order of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court that abandoned the Constitution that settled the issue on the table. Those 27 lawmakers, we will eventually come back to managing the smoke and when the fire will die down. If anybody thinks that the matter has now been settled because might has become right, well, we'll be watching. But Ninas took his position on the subject to say that the Supreme Court could not have placed itself, will not be allowed to place itself above the Constitution in the manner it has consistently done. We saw the local government autonomy that they tried to make amendments to the Constitution to bring autonomy to local government. Local government in our federation cannot be a tier of government. Local government is not a tier of government. And so, how will it now become a direct allocation from center to local government? And so, they tried the amendment. Ninas was able to mobilize the House of Assemblies to reject any step towards what they call a concurrence, because you needed 24 states and all of that to concur. And so, we came down to where that amendment failed. This same government goes back in its desperation, whatever be its purpose, because they want to, we are departing further and further from the federation we should be. That's the danger that's going on. They went through the Supreme Court to now say, okay, direct allocation to local government areas and all of that. As we speak, the governors are just doing whatever they find to do to continue to manage their space. The Constitution, the question of local government is not a tier of government in Nigeria as yet. Until we make it a tier of the third tier of government, and it has to be by discussion and agreement. We're a federation for goodness sake. Nigeria is failing because we departed from the path of federalism. And what is the way to return to that federalism? We are traveling in the opposite direction by going further in the opposite direction of centralizing the control of even the local government. We have not recovered from the centralized control of the states in the 68 items of exclusive list that was inserted into the Constitution undiscussed, totally undiscussed. Because go back to the preamble, it is a lie that we, the peoples of Nigeria, solemnly resolve together to live in unity forever, indissoluble and indivisible, and that we make and give unto ourselves that constitution. That is the lie we are talking about. And it goes to every single provision of that constitution, including the 36 states that they created by decrees, including the 700 local government areas that were all created by decrees, including the 68 items of exclusive list, including the appropriation provisions that give this heads of executive branch the spare key to the treasury, including section 6, subsection 6C, that absolve the government of responsibility towards the citizen. Young people throughout the country may think that the government owes them school and hospital. The Constitution in section 6, subsection 6C, absolve the government of all responsibility towards you, because what is due to you as citizen is sitting in chapter 2 of that Constitution. That section 6, subsection 6C, says it is at the discretion of those in government to do or not to do, and that no court can listen to you if you come to cry that they have not, meaning that it is discretionary to them to provide you school, hospital, or even the basic welfare and security. They don't owe you all of that in black and white. And they have the spare key to the treasury in sections 122, 121, 122 for governors, and section 81, 82 for president. They can take all the money in the treasury. They have immunity in section 308. So these people who are swearing to defend and uphold that constitution that we didn't make every 4 years, in the face of all our protestations, to say we can't continue to build on this kind of a foundation that can only lead to death, that can only lead to damnation and misery for the people, while those who are, swearing to defend and uphold that constitution are sharing humongous sums every month. You saw them declare surplus of 10 trillion the other day among themselves. The following month, they said they had another surplus of 6 trillion naira. And you now begin to say, in that same space, the government is declaring surplus in trillions. The citizens are unable to feed. They are running in every direction away from Nigeria. 7 million businesses have been killed by the policies that are run from the first day. The withdrawal of fuel subsidy and the floating of the naira against a backdrop of an economy that was not producing anything. So that's how the citizens and the populace got plunged into this calamity. And talking about the procedure for declaring state of emergency, that does not even arise, because you can see that they set out, they are working from the answers. They've arrived at where they plan to go from the first day, because the Constitution is clear for what has happened and what needs to happen. But the Supreme Court is working outside the Constitution. Just everything is done. INEC had election to conduct. There are rules for what will happen on election day. INEC abandoned those rules in terms of electronic transmission of results from the place of voting, real time. INEC abandoned that guideline of their own, which was done pursuant to the electoral law of the time. That should have been the end of that, that discussion, if the law was to be applied. But this same Supreme Court, stood on the side of lawlessness and said that the election will stand. That's how we came to this. So whatever has been going on between the executive, between the president of Nigeria and those Supreme Court justices that will lead them to be doing all these kind of things, Nigeria will be the first casualty in this abominable recklessness, in this obdurate, I don't even know how to describe it anymore, because 200 million people that are already struggling with many things. What is the fate of those people in rivers now? You begin to withhold their funds and all of that. Under which law? Under which law? We ask the Supreme Court of Nigeria. Under which law? We ask the president. Under which law has all these things been? Under which provision of the Constitution did we arrive at this kind of nasty situation that is building up? It's not going to vaporize. I can already see from where I am that the people who are sitting in Abuja and who are imagining that they've conquered everybody, they do not realize the meaning of Constitution. Constitution is the union agreement. People are saying we have not agreed. the most urgent business Nigeria has to do now is to call a meeting of the owners of Nigeria to discuss whether they want to remain in union.
That's right.
And if so,
that's actually that's where I'm coming to now. Renegotiating the union, the people of Nigeria must come together to redefine and recommit to the terms of the union. What does that mean in clear terms?
We are in March. We are in March of 2025. Nigeria is failing on all fronts, in all areas of human progress. Nigeria is lagging behind the rest of the world. We have identified the reason it is so. The constitution by which Nigeria is being managed, by which Nigeria is convened, that's a different subject. And managed, convened in the sense that when we say we the people, it means we the Ijo standing on Ijo land, we the Ogoni standing on Ogoni land, we the Igbo standing on Igbo land, we the Yoruba standing in Yoruba land, we the Bero, we the Tiv standing in our ancestral spaces. Having firmly and solemnly resolved, meaning that we have to sit down and agree on all things, first to be in union, and then on the terms of that union. Those are two different things. So we have not identified, apart from what the British did in 1914, you have not identified the people federating. You say it's Imo State, and Abia State, and River State. Entities you created by brigandage. And the people who live in those, who own the lands that you aggregate into this Union of Nigeria are crying and shouting for almost 60 years now, since 1967. Since 1967. It was that discussion that led to the war. After they went to Aburi, came back, having agreed to go to that discussion, to work with what they had agreed. Then Gowon and his confederates abandoned it and began to kill people. Almost 5 million people by Gowon's own account. Gowon is still alive. Let those who complain, when the truth will confront them in the most inconvenient way, let them go and tell Gowon to confess what happened to Nigeria. He's still alive now. And we're telling everybody that he came back, left the agreement, began to kill people, himself and Murtala Mohammed. Eventually, by 1975, Murtala Mohammed commissioned the drafting of a constitution that will make people slaves in their homeland. That's what we're dealing with now. So what Nigeria has to do to rescue itself from this path of damnation is to summon the courage to call a meeting that will allow the owners of the land who are now fed up with Nigeria. And I'm not telling you this from the sidelines. I'm telling you as one who is directly involved in the efforts they are making to extricate themselves from the union of death that unitary Nigeria has become for them. And it is on account of their sovereignty that is not negotiable. Their sovereignty is inalienable. It's on account of their right to self-determination, pursuant to their sovereignty, that they have that right now to say, we have to make Nigeria our union by discussion. Otherwise, we will exercise our right to self-determination. That right to self-determination is, many people think it's just, oh, we leave the union. No, self-determination means you decide how you live in your space. You could decide to be a federation if we go to a meeting today. We could decide to be a confederation. Return the autonomy that you took by brigandage, by decree from everybody to them. Or if we can't find common ground because some people are doing Sharia or doing feudalism in one side or this type of thing we have seen, then it becomes the emergence of independent units of sovereign state entities. Those are the three things that can happen. But that meeting has to be called sooner than later. And Nina placed a plan on the table. I said we're in March of 2025. Every step taken towards going to another round of national elections in 2027 under this constitution that dispenses death to the populace. I tell you, the victims of that unitary constitution are being mobilized to confront the enforcers of unitary Nigeria. Who are the enforcers? All of those who are planning to go to election now. Let somebody tell Peter Obi, that the constitution by which the winner of any election will govern is dispensing debt and poverty. And he is not going to be able to touch anything in it if he becomes president. Let somebody tell Bola Tinubu that people are dying in large numbers. and he's insulting them and making life much more difficult for them. You saw the copper that cried out. You saw what Tinubu's aide said about it, that copper deserves death sentence, death penalty, for saying that the president has been terrible to her and the rest of people around her. These are the things that you are dealing with human beings, 230 million human beings. But because you sit in Abuja, shielding yourself from them, empowering yourself from a constitution they didn't make, and the more they complain, the more insults you heap on them. It will not continue like that. Let those who are, what we can do today, the first thing is to acknowledge the problem and to call off this stupid journey to another election under that constitution. And Ninas and those who are suffering from that Nigeria that's upside down are going to take it out against those who are planning to go to that election. Whether they're PDP or they're APC or they're SDP, they all subscribe to that constitution. We have almost 2 years or 3 from now to talk about what constitution we want in order to remain in one political union and in order to remain, a federation, to go back to being a federation. We have to discuss that matter before they proceed to election.
All right.
All the political parties subscribe to that constitution that is killing people, but giving the people in government house so much money. Those governors that gather every month, those senators, we see the madness going on in their midst. They are all together. The religious leaders that stay with them and mobilize the flock to elections, they are all in that enforcer of unitary Nigeria. That's where they are. But in the days ahead, that journey to 2027 election under the 1999 Constitution, whatever the victims of that Constitution find to do to prevent the lunatics that are dragging them to that election, it may be democracy for them, it's not democracy for the ones at the receiving end. The ones whose economic assets are detained.
All right.
The ones whose lives matter nothing.
All right. Barrister Nadi, we'll have to take a break at this point. We'll take a breather on the Eastern Eye, and when we come back, we will conclude this conversation. Stay with us. This is the Eastern Eye. The program returns after this break. Welcome back to the Eastern Eye here on Afia TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Just like we told you some minutes earlier, the president has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State, suspending the governor and his deputy and all members of the Rivers State House of Assembly, suspending them for 6 initial months. And of course, that is in keeping with the powers provided in Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He declared that state of emergency. Vice Admiral retired Ibok Ete Ibas will be the sole administrator for 6 months in Rivers State. The judiciary is not affected in Rivers State. And Mr. President, in keeping with the constitutional provisions of Section 305, stated that he has transmitted the gazetted proclamation to the National Assembly and that both houses will, within 2 days, if they are in session, or within 10 days, if they are in session, will have to affirm or approve this resolution. So, but that's the situation there in Rivers State. The president has declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. In this part of the world, so the bad situation just got worse for Fubara and his men. So, Barrister Tony Nadi, at the end of the day, the state of emergency has been declared. Fubara and his deputy and the members of the State House of Assembly, whether you're the legal one or the illegal one, all of them are out of the way for 6 months. So what would Rivers people do? Did anybody ask them whether they want state of emergency? That's the question.
Normally, that state of emergency should have been initiated by the governor when things begin to get out of hand. But they've turned everything upside down. What I see happening is like it's said, whom the gods will destroy, they first make mad. That's all I can say about what has happened. Because the foundation upon which this state of emergency is constructed is flawed beyond redemption. That judgment of the Supreme Court that brought these fellows who had left their party and therefore lost their seats by operation of law, not by any kind of thing anybody had to do. It is by operation of law that they lost their seats. And having lost those seats, they found out later that they had made a mistake in not realizing that they would lose the seat, because they left the party to continue as a majority of 27, to leave the other 4 to go to hell. That was their thinking. But when the law was explained to them, they began to dance around to say, okay, we are not living anymore, thinking that they will just go and resume. No, from that point that they lost their seats from operation of the law, mark my words, not because any court or did not say, from that one moment it is established that they left their party at a time the party was not in a division. They have lost their seat. All the things that happened in court or whatever else were matters after they have lost their seat. The only way to return to those seats will be for INEC to conduct elections, which they are at liberty to conduct, to compete in or contest in, to return. But the speaker, as recognized by the rules, by the constitution, as it were, had declared those seats vacant. INEC had not conducted that election. So those 27 men could not validly, because the Supreme Court sitting in Abuja said so, return and become the assembly. It was their return in the circumstances that had become the basis of breakdown of law and order. Where are we now? Nigeria will soon get to find out that the river state they created on the 27th of May in 1967 had not become a replacement for the Ijaw that is feeling injured, insulted, deprived, brutalized at this time. Ditto for the rest of the people in that class. For now, you are going to find out that their allegiance, that their first allegiance is not to that artificial creation of Nigeria. We were talking about the anthem that they changed. Look at the old anthem. It was when Buhari was president that we interrogated that old anthem. And I had called to ask Muhammad Buhari, arise, O compatriots. I said to him, which compatriot? You are here with Fulani, you are president of Fulani extraction. You threw a borders open to bring Fulani from everywhere to kill off the owners of the land and take their land. The governor in Benue, thief, comes to you in Abuja to say, your people are invading and killing the people I am governing. And you say, go home and learn to live in peace with the Fulani of Benue. That was Buhari's answer to Samuel Ortom. At the time, Fulani people were sweeping through Benue southwards. Today, Bola Tinubu has done exactly the same thing with Sim Fubara. But he will soon find out that he wasn't talking to River State. He will soon find out that that unfinished business of Nigeria will have to be finished. That the nationalities who do not, feel any allegiance at all to this fake and, artificial entities of Nigeria imposed on us like the Berlin Conference boundaries were imposed on Africa after the 1885 conference. That is how most people feel. That is how the indigenous nationalities feel concerning those artificial boundaries. You then sit in Abuja, hoping that you have some river state and Bayelsa that is standing apart so that you can do with Fubara whatever you choose. Nigeria is going to learn the hard way. That is how people who refuse to learn eventually get to learn. And so you move from that anthem where we told Buhari that we cannot be lying to ourselves both in anthem and in pledge. I pledge to Nigeria and my country to be faithful, loyal, and honest. Just every stanza of it like our constitution is a lie, like the preamble to that constitution.
All right. So
if you have 100 people in the room,
yes.
Are you able to say with any certainty that even 5 of them are saying those things from their heart? I am not.
All right,
so
but
even this new,
Barrister Nadi,
this old thing that has become new.
Yes, pardon me. I have
mocking
to.
ourselves.
Barrister Nadi, because we have about 4 minutes to go, and I need to ask you this question so we can talk it in within that 4 minutes. So, transitioning to a new order. How do we establish a transitional process to implement the new constitutional arrangements? In your own analysis, how do you think it should go? Because apparently it doesn't look like anyone is listening to what Nina's has put on the table.
We're not bothered. You know, already explained to you that they do not understand the concept of sovereignty in their mediocrity. They do not understand the concept of sovereignty. So they think we must come to convince them in Abuja. We already said we don't have to come to hold any meeting with them. Yoruba land will be a country of 60 million people. If Yoruba decides today to remove themselves from it, is their right to self-determination. It is their right to decide how they do that. The UN instrument on the subject. The fellows gathered in Abuja don't seem to understand that at all. They think Nigeria is sacrosanct, but they do not know that there's an instrument superior to whatever they are hanging on to, particularly this forged 1999 constitution. That's the title they are banking on. And so there's superior instrument, there's superior knowledge on that subject matter, and we're organizing the owners of those lands that are now called Nigeria on account of that forgery of a constitution. Forgery in the sense that nobody called anybody to any meeting. The decree number 24 by which this fellow called Absalom Abubakar imposed that constitution is there printed in that constitution. And so what has to happen, except they want to forget the Nigerian Union, because that's also an outcome. It may well be that they do not want the union at all. That's why they're carrying on in the manner they're carrying on. But the people who are choking in that union and who have the right to extricate themselves from that union of death are carrying on well within their right to self-determination on account of their sovereignty that nobody can take away from them. It may be suppressed. What Nigeria has now, the Nigeria that we're operating now, is a suzerainty, like the British invasion of colonialism, imposing itself on the sovereign constituent component. And what we have done in NINAT was to organize a consensus of the entire Nigeria. Ijo was invited as Ijo, Ogboni as Ogboni, Yoruba as Yoruba. We had 2 years of meeting, sitting in Lagos, Port Harcourt, Enugu, Jos, and we have come to a consensus that we need to stop and make a U-turn from this unitary constitution that has plunged Nigeria to the pit of damnation. It can be done inside the first half of 2025. It starts with the president or whoever can speak on his behalf acknowledging that this constitution is the problem with Nigeria. The economy of Nigeria, the security of Nigeria, the infrastructure of Nigeria, the election of Nigeria, everything that has gone wrong with Nigeria, that is the problem. Secondly, to commit to the decommissioning. That was what South Africa did with the apartheid constitution when they found themselves in this kind of situation we are in now. Commit to decommissioning. It takes only an announcement to acknowledge, to commit to decommissioning. Then the first order of business is to suspend the joint to another election under so that we can go and deal with this matter. We have been postponing it since after Aburi of 1967. We now have to deal with it, otherwise something else will overtake all of us.
All right.
If anybody is stupid enough to think that by sitting and intimidating people, I hear that their answer to what has happened with the copper is that people should be more patriotic. Patriotic to a criminal entity. Nigeria has become a criminal enterprise under this constitution. Nigeria has become a criminal enterprise under a constitution that is built on the foundation of falsehood and lies in black and white. And so we are just going to tell them, like we've told them in writing.
All right.
Since the force majeure proclamation was put on the table, the details are there. Item 4, that they have to acknowledge.
We'll have to let it.
Is
We really have to let it go at this point. Barrister Tony Nadi, I will have to thank you so much.
So it's just a matter of one announcement covering those 5 items on that proposition. That's right. What needs to happen now. If they don't want to do it, the owners of the sovereignty will solve the problem themselves every way they find to do it.
Thank you. Barrister Tony Nadi, Secretary General, Lower Niger Congress, and co-convener of the Nigerian Indigenous Nationalities Alliance for Self-Determination, NINAS. Thank you for your insights and perspectives on the Eastern Eye tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's the Eastern Eye for tonight. Join us tomorrow same time for another episode of the program. And don't fail to join me on the radio program Straight Talk. That's at 9 a.m. tomorrow on Afia 99.3 FM. You can listen to us on afia993.com. It's live. My name is Alex Obodo. Up next is Nka with Chinalo Rumogo. Eze. Good night.